Now, heat pumps are all the rage. Boris Johnson seems to be completely sold on the idea of heat pumps, and there was a big announcement that, a £5,000 grant is going to go to people to get a new heat pump. The trouble is that only applies to 90,000 houses, and there are 27 million houses in the country. But there is some debate about heat pumps, debate about their efficiency, debate about their cost, and debate about whether they work in cold weather. Well, joining me now is Director of Heat Pumps for Homes, David Morris. David, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Now, I guess, given the name of your business, you're kind of going to be quite pro heat pumps. So, just tell us: is Boris right? Is Boris right to say that after 2035 there'll be no more gas boilers and we'll all move to heat pumps? Is this the right thing, in theory, for the country to do?
Well, Nigel, from a climate change point of view, using a heat pump, of course, reduces CO2 emissions. So if the government strategy is to reduce fossil fuel use, then a heat pump is certainly the right way to go. Heat pumps are not always right for all properties. We have to consider properties on a case-by-case basis, and it's certainly not as simple to fit a heat pump solution as it is to fit a new gas boiler.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point, David, that was being made to me, that a lot of new builds that are built to modern building standards, for them, a heat pump can work, and actually, in most conditions, and I'll come back to that point, but in most conditions can work pretty efficiently. But so many people in this country live in old housing stock with, windows that may not be completely draft-proof, insulation that may not be up to the standard that it should be, where it's very difficult, for example, to use methods like underfloor heating. There's a lot of housing stock here, David Morris, that these would not be appropriate for.
Yeah.
Any ideas?
Nigel.
Okay.
We have to consider each property on a case-by-case basis. Insulation levels need to be good. The secret of getting a successful heat pump installation is the design. We take a lot of trouble with each property to look at each property, to look at the design. If they're designed well and installed well, they work extremely well. The problems arise when the installer doesn't consider all of the factors on that particular property, or the installer is not properly qualified to fit and design a heat pump. So I would advise all customers thinking of heat pump installations to make sure that their installer is MCS approved, which is the body that designs and regulates heat pump installations, and that they've got the suitable track record. In terms of existing property, you're absolutely right. If the heat pump was installed into a property that had very poor insulation levels, there's a risk that the running cost will be higher than an existing gas boiler. Yeah.
And here's the big one, though, David, and I've got some experience of heat pumps, using a heat pump outdoors to heat an outdoor swimming pool. Doing that in the summer, I have to say, they are pretty efficient and quite cheap to run, and I get all of that, so I can see there are places where they can be used. But isn't the real problem with heat pumps that when the outside temperature falls below 5 degrees centigrade, or significantly below 5 degrees centigrade, they do not produce the kind of hot water that most houses would want?
Yes, Nigel, that's partially true, but as part of the design, what we take into account is the output of the heat pump at different temperatures. So to do this design properly, we will size down to, say, -5 degrees. We work out the heat energy that the building needs, and we make sure that the output of the heat pump at -5 degrees is still sufficient to meet that demand. As long as the output of the heat pump is in excess of the demand for the property, you're still going to have sufficient heat. Problems only arise if the design doesn't take that into account, and you have a shortfall between the output of the heat pump and the demand at low temperatures.
And finally, David, the cost of heat pumps, somewhere between £10,000 and £20,000, depending on the home. And, I hear the argument that with technology, the price will likely come down, and I don't, dispute that. But isn't the reality of this that actually heat pumps, in order to meet climate change targets, it's a rich man's game, isn't it?
Nigel, what you're saying is partially true. From a financial point of view, if customers at the moment, with the price of gas as it has been, if they were just looking at a heat pump solution from a financial point of view, then and comparing it with mains gas, then from a running cost point of view, there's not a lot in it, and from a capital cost point of view, it's higher.